Today we are doing section 4.2, domain and range, and let's go ahead and start this off. Our domain are the x values, they are the x values in a function. And we also, to find the domain, we always start at the left and go to the right. For the range, these are the y values in a function. So y values in a function. And for the range, we always start from the bottom and go to the top. So if you notice, we go from left to right for x values for our domain. For the range, we go from the bottom to the top. Overall, what we are doing here is we are going from the smallest to biggest. So smallest to biggest when it comes to the numbers. We're starting at the smaller numbers and going to the bigger numbers. So let's find the domain and range of each function here. For the first graph right here, we have this line. Our domain, let's label that x to remind us we're looking for the x values. We are going to start, so here it is. Here's the pointer. We have our x values right here, our x-axis. So we are going to find where does our graph start? Let's go all the way to the left and see, well, the graph starts right here where x is -7. So let's go ahead and write -7 right here. I'm going to make this a little bigger so we can see it better. X is -7. And then that is going to be less than or equal to. We put less than or equal to because we have this solid point right here. We have the solid circle, so that's less than or equal to x less than or equal to, and then we go all the way to the right. So we started right here at -7 for our graph, and again we're on the x-axis. We go all the way to the right, and we see our graph ends here where x is 6. So let's go ahead and write 6 at the end. So the way the domain reads is -7 is less than or equal to all the values of x, where x is less than or equal to 6. That's the way that reads. Let's go ahead and try the range now. For our range, we will be looking at all the y values. So let's go ahead and look at the y values, the y-axis. Now, let's start, as it says, we start from the bottom and work our way up, and we can see our y value for this graph starts right here where y is -4. So we write -4 is less than or equal to, again, because there's that solid point, y, which is less than or equal to 5. This is the height. This is where the y values stop, right here with this graph at 5. So let's go ahead and put 5 right there. So it reads -4 is less than or equal to all the y values, whereas let's see, read it again. -4 is less than or equal to these y values, which are less than or equal to 5. Now let's go to our next graph. We have this graph right here with this arrow. Notice we have a closed circle and an arrow. So what is our domain here? So let's go ahead and start with our domain, which are our x values. So let's go ahead and write x. So our x values here, we have to start from the left, right? And then we go to the right. So start at the left. We can see we have this arrow right here. This arrow indicates infinity. And the way we write infinity is, well, we can see this arrow is pointing towards the negative numbers. So we have, it's going negative and it's going infinite, meaning this arrow just continues on and on. There's no end to it. So we will put negative infinity. Let me make that a better negative. Negative infinity is less than, and we're not going to put equal to because it's not a specific number. So we're just going to put less than x, which is less than or equal to, and we can see right here, our x values start at left and it goes all the way to here, which is 6. So let's go ahead and put less than or equal to 6. And that is our range. It couldn't fit it on the line, but you can see it right there. Now our range, or I'm sorry, that is our domain. That's not the range. The domain is negative infinity, which is right here. Negative infinity is less than x, all these x values, which are less than or equal to 6. Now let's do our range. Our range are our y values. And we start at the bottom and we go to the top. So let's start at the bottom here. What's the lowest rank for our range? Our lowest y value here is at -2. So we will put -2. I'm going to write it down here so I have a little more room. -2 is less than or equal to, because we have that closed circle. -2 is less than or equal to the y values. So -2 is less than or equal to all these y values. And notice this arrow is going to keep going, right? So our y values are going to be infinite. So we are going to put less than infinity. So -2 is less than or equal to y, which is less than infinity. Let's find the domain and range of each function for number 1 down here. It says, so we have our x and y values here. So the domain, again, when we're looking for domain, we are looking for our x values. So let's go ahead and look at x here. We have 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we will write our domain as a set of numbers, and we will start with the smallest number and go to the biggest number. So smallest number is 1, so we have 1, comma 2, comma 3, comma 4. For our range, we will do the same thing, but we will look at the y's. So our range are our y values. Now we will look at 5, 1, -3, and -7. So let's go ahead and write our range as a set of numbers here. And our smallest number that we have here would be -7. Because remember, our range, we go from the bottom, which are the smallest numbers, to the top, which are the greater numbers. So we have -7, -3, comma 1, comma 5. And that is our range. Let's go ahead and find our domain and range for our graph right here. We have this open circle and it goes to an arrow. So if you remember, our domain is our x values. So our domain would be, well, again, we're looking at the x values here. So we have our x-axis, and that starts right here at -2. But we can see right there that -2 is not necessarily included. So we know -2 would be less than x, which would be less than, and we have this arrow, which means infinity. And infinity is not a specific number, so we have to use just the less than. We can't use less than or equal to for this one. Now for our range, we are looking for the y values. So y, we start from the bottom and work our way up. So we start from the bottom and we see right here, we start at 1. So let's go ahead and put 1 is less than, can't put equal to because it's an open circle, so less than y, which is less than infinity. And that is our range. Let's go ahead and look over here. We have our x values and we have our y values. Excuse me. We have our x values, which are our x inputs for -7, -2, 0, and 5. And then our outputs, which are our y values. If you put in -7, you'll come out with -1. If you put in -2, you'll come out with -4. So I'm just kind of reading it through for you. If you put in 0, you'll come out with -1. If you put in 5, you'll come out with -9. So this is the input and output. Okay, but we need to find the domain and range. So remember, our domain are our x values, our range are our y values. So what is our domain? Well, it's going to be a set of numbers here. Our domain, we always start with the smallest number. So we have -7, -2, 0, 5. Let's go in and do our range. Will be a set of numbers here. Always start with the smallest number. So we have -9, -4, and -1. Let's go to the next page. Now let's find the domain and range of each function here. So right here, if you notice, they actually give us our x's and they give us our y's. They give us our points here. So we can use this graph or we could just use the given points. And we can see, well, for our domain, those are our x values. We start at the left for our x values, and then we go to the right. So our x value here. So our x value would be right here, and this is at -2. Well, look, they actually give us -2 right there. So we have our x value is -2, which is less than or equal to, because we have that closed circle, x, which is less than or equal to 3. We're given that at the top. Let's go ahead and find our range. Remember, we always start at the bottom. So we start at the bottom, and the bottom y would be -3. -3 is less than or equal to, because it's a closed circle, y, which is less than or equal to, the top y would be 7. So -3 is less than or equal to y, which is less than or equal to 7. Let's go ahead and find the domain and range for this next one. So we have this parabola looking situation here. Well, we can see that this point right here, we can assume that this point is a closed point and that it touches right there. So when we're looking for our range, we'll be able to use that. So let's start off with our domain here, our x values. Well, right here you can see that we have 2 arrows, which mean whenever we see these arrows, we know those are infinity. So we have an infinity to an infinity. So let's go ahead and write this down. So we have -infinity is less than x. Again, we're doing domain, our x values right here. So we're starting at the left, which is an arrow, and we're going to the right, which is an arrow. So -infinity is less than x, which is less than infinity. Another way to write it is we can say all real numbers with this symbol. So that means the same thing. But for now, we'll just put the -infinity is less than x, which is less than infinity. Now let's go to our y. We are going to start at the bottom and work our way up. So what's the lowest y value that we have? Well, that is at -2, because we're starting at the bottom, working our way up, -2. So -2, which is less than or equal to, because it is a closed circle, y, which is going to be less than infinity. Okay, let's go ahead and do domain and range again for our input and output. So we have our x values and we have our y values over here. So let's go ahead and put in our domain here, which is a set of numbers. Put in the smallest number first. We always start from smallest and go to biggest. So smallest for x values for the domain would be -4, -1, 0, 2, 7. Our y values, which would be our range, are going to start with the smallest value of -5, 0, 1, 2, 4. Last, let's go ahead and do this graph and find the domain and range. Our domain are our x values. So let's start at the left. Then we work our way to the right. We start at the left, which is right here. Well, let's start at the left, stop. Go right here to -2. So we have -2 is less than or equal to, because we have a closed circle, x, which is less than or equal to, well, actually it wouldn't be equal to, it would just be less than, because we have this open circle right here, and that's at 4. So let's go ahead and put 4. So -2 is less than or equal to x, which is less than 4. Now let's do our range, which we start at the bottom and work our way up. So we start at the bottom, and we can see we go to -3. So for our range, which are our y values, we do -3 is less than or equal to, again, closed circle, and then we go to the top, which would be 3. Less than 3. And again, it's less than because it's an open circle.